Now this is Freedom Watch. The money pit, also known as the federal government. Tonight, Glen Beck is here.
They call people like you and me crazy.
On how America got itself into this fiscal mess from wasteful spending, excessive borrowing, and reckless money printing.
It can be an inflation risk. Obviously, this is something we have to watch carefully.
And Congressman Scott Garrett is here, my congressman. He's furious over the government's financial catastrophe and explains what must be done to address the government's debt.
No one in America believes that we can simply borrow our way into prosperity.
Then, New York City wants to force private pro-life clinics to tell their pregnant patients about abortion options. Councilman Dan Halloran is here on this unconstitutional interference with free speech. Plus, Cato's Dan Mitchell asks, if unionized public service jobs are so bad, why do these workers never quit? All that. And our freedom fighters, Liz Clayman, Benjamin Powell, Mike Norman. The president is willing to let states opt out of his own health care law. Is this a sign that even he thinks Obamacare is a disaster? Because it absolutely runs afoul of these principles. That government is best which governs least. The people are entitled to a government that stays within the confines of the Constitution. The Constitution was written to keep the government off the people's backs. Beck, Garrett, Mitchell, Clayman, Halloran, Norman, Freedom Watch. The revolution continues now. Tonight on the docket, drowning in debt. It looks like Republicans and Democrats have a deal to keep the government open for another 2 weeks. 2 weeks before they need to make hard decisions again. America, if you had a friend who used a credit card to pay off old debt, you'd know that he was both broke and brazenly irresponsible. But that's exactly what Congress and presidents have been doing for generations. Yet so-called experts on the left and the right argue that debts don't matter. Government spending will grow us all out of economic peril, and that growth will balance the budget. That's right. Big government folks from both parties say the way to get out of debt is to spend more. This insanity runs rampant in Washington because it allows government to justify spending money it doesn't have. One could say Congress and the president are delusional when it comes to debt and spending. Glen Beck and Congressman Scott Garrett will analyze that in just a moment. But the million-dollar question, wait, the current debt level is $14 trillion. It's expected to be $15.6 trillion by the end of 2011. So let me rephrase it. The $15.6 trillion question is, how on earth did America get here? With me now to explain just that is none other than Glen Beck, host of the Glen Beck program, my colleague and my friend. Glen, how are you? Welcome here.
We have been sold a load of goods. We had been marketed to by both parties for a very long time. Judge, I was one who sadly believed in that. You know, some debt isn't bad. Everybody has some debt. You might have a debt for your house, but out of control debt is irresponsible.
If the president were the CEO of a corporation and it were teetering on the brink of bankruptcy, and the CEO and the board of directors was the Congress, and they're looking the other way, and instead of doing something about $15.6 trillion, they want to borrow more money, they'd be fired.
No, they wouldn't be fired. They'd all be in jail. All of the people that are involved in this would be in jail. Bernie Madoff was right when he said,
it's a Ponzi scheme.
Yeah, it's an absolute Ponzi scheme.
And every president, going back to Woodrow Wilson, monster that he was, a conservative like Warren Harding and Ronald Reagan, a liberal like Jimmy Carter and Bill Clinton, socialists like FDR and Barack Obama, all did the same thing. Debt. Print us money from the Federal Reserve. Let another generation worry about paying it back.
Me personally, I think you can gather debt, but responsible debt and debt, for instance, like people have an auto loan. You can do that, but as Thomas Jefferson said, you must pay it off.
Right. Well,
you're responsible for your debt.
If you have an auto loan and a house loan, a mortgage, presumably the auto is worth more than the debt on it, and the house is worth more than the debt on it.
Correct.
So you have security for the debt. What security does the government have other than its good word that it'll borrow money to pay its lenders?
Are you ready?
Yeah.
Read history. How did Germany pay off the Deutschmark? Do you know?
Wow. With
You know?
inflation.
No. First inflation, but how did they reset?
How?
Land. What does Freddie and Fannie have now?
Freddie and Fannie.
Freddie and Fannie have 98% of everybody. You default, who's holding that deed?
Freddie and
Yes, exactly
So
right.
what do you think the government will do? Take property
I have no idea.
from private individuals through Freddie and Fannie and sell it?
If you look to history, you look to reset, and you find something of value. Well, the only thing we have of value are our resources, which we're not tapping, and our land.
Why are we recognizing this now? Why are we talking about this now? Not when JFK was president, not even when
We're not
Reagan
even
was
recognizing.
president.
We're not recognizing.
Well, you and I are, and some Tea Party people in the Congress are. Mike Lee, Rand Paul, Ron Paul, Connie Mack. Some folks are saying, this is time to bite the bullet. We cannot raise the debt ceiling no matter what.
Here's the real problem, Judge, is we're not going to survive biting the bullet here because there's not enough people explaining what it means when we say no. No, you've got to reverse this in a dramatic way. No more. That will mean really impactful things to the average American. And when that happens, it works to the advantage of the radicals who now want a fundamental transformation of America.
Should every Republican in the House of Representatives vote against raising the debt ceiling?
Every Republican in the House of Representatives and the Senate, and every Republican from here, from coast to coast, whether you're in office or not, should be sitting down with their neighbors right now and saying, listen, this is what happens. It is over. This free ride is over. We can either save ourselves and go through a lot of pain together, or we're just going to go through a lot of pain, we're going to be ripped apart, and there will be nothing left in the end.
What is your greatest fear as to what could happen in the next 5 or 10 years if the government doesn't get its house in order?
A new fear that actually I've just seen here recently, because I've been seeing the way things are slipping in the rest of the world with revolution. And that is that a real revolution doesn't come, a real true revolution, which was my previous greatest fear. But instead, it's bottom up, top down, and inside out. It is a moment where the government says, oh, well, we've got to correct this, and they just clamp down on everything. And freedom changes, just like it did in the Roman Empire. The republic is gone, but all of the images still remain. So the average person remains asleep.
Are we going to be like Libya or Egypt or Tunisia with mobs in the streets demanding that the government go?
Have you been watching the news lately? It's already happening.
Watching the news in Wisconsin.
It's already happening. It's already
predicted this.
Yes, I did. I said when Tunisia happened, I said what you're seeing in Tunisia right now with WikiLeaks, what you're seeing with the people on there is the Archduke Ferdinand moment.
Right.
That nobody recognized. Everybody thought it was ridiculous.
The assassination of a relative nobody that triggered World War I.
Yes, and that's what you're seeing. This is, I hope I am wrong.
How? We only have about a minute left. How is what's happening in Wisconsin and they move to Ohio and Indiana, New Jersey, the Archduke Ferdinand moment?
Because you're seeing it flipped in Tunisia, then WikiLeaks exposed Egypt, and it flipped in Egypt, then Libya. WikiLeaks exposed that, it's flipping there. Now they're exposing Saudi Arabia. What do you think's happening? Also, you have the ties from the union labor and the Islamists all over the world that are all tied together for the mutual satisfaction of destroying the Western way of life.
Destroying the Western way of life. Here in America.
All around the world.
Glenn, why is it every time we have these conversations I say to myself, we could do this for an hour?
Because we could, and it may be all we have.
All right. Glenn Beck, it's always a pleasure.
We got like 90 minutes.
Thank you very much for joining us, man, because you are opening up people's eyes.
Thank you, sir.
Glenn Beck, thanks for being with us on Freedom Watch. This debt disaster took years to develop. The federal debt is about the same size as the entire United States economy. Clearly, drastic changes to spending policy are needed. We can't just tax ourselves out of this mess. But who in Congress has the courage to stand for substantial cuts, and in some cases, painful spending cuts? With me now is my own congressman, New Jersey Republican Scott Garrett. Congressman Garrett, it's a pleasure. Welcome back to Freedom Watch.
It's a pleasure, as always, to be with you. Thanks for the opportunity.
What is the latest on the continuing resolution, that is, an agreement between the President, the Senate, and the House for some temporary money to be spent so the government doesn't shut down on Friday?
Well, the latest is, as having just voted for a continuation for the next 2 weeks, it's back in the Senate's hands. So it's really today is the same as it was a couple weeks ago on Harry Reid's desk to finally make some decisions, and as you point out, some difficult decisions. So we wait on him to act.
Now, I know that you're a fiscal conservative, as you know I am, but what really is accomplished by 2 weeks? Won't we be back in 10 days, almost precisely where we are today?
Well, hopefully not the exact same position. Look, the House passed the first CR, as you know, where we put in the $100 billion cut. We lived up to our pledge, as we discussed in the past, and sent it over to the Senate. And what did the Senate do? Well, they basically went on vacation for about a week. And instead of taking that up and deliberating and see whether they could agree to it, increase it, decrease it, or do something else, they went on a vacation for a week and didn't do anything with it. I think that was absolutely the wrong thing to do. It goes to the issue of which party really wants to shut down the government. We don't want to shut down the government, but they're going on vacation and not deliberating. So we're right back to where we were 2 weeks ago, if you will, and it's in their hands, and hopefully they'll do what the American public has asked them to do, send us a bill that would actually cut federal spending.
All right. At some point, you're going to be asked to raise the debt ceiling to allow Treasury Secretary Geithner to go out and borrow more money. You know that I've been ranting and raving for months now that this shouldn't be done. I understand the pressures that are on members of Congress to do that. Question, what will the Republican leadership encourage the majority Republicans in the House to do when the president wants to borrow more money?
Yeah, well, the Republican leadership has already said that A, they don't want to shut down the government, and B, that they're all about trying to meet the requirements of raising the debt limit. So I would anticipate that's what you'll see in the next discussion coming out of leadership in the House. And then the question that comes in after that will be, so what will they ask for from the administration, from the Senate, in order to do raise the debt limit?
Wow. Senator Mike Lee, your colleague as a fiscal hawk, predicted that the government will be shut down, that there will be no agreement, that the Republicans in the House will not give the president and Harry Reid the spending authority that they want.
Yeah. Well, I don't think that we certainly won't give them the spending authority that they want where they are right now. Where Reid says basically in his last message to the House that we're spending the right amount of money. We don't need to make any cuts whatsoever. It's basically Reid's message. Obviously, the Senate President has not heard from the American public, who says just the opposite. They say that we need to cut spending. So if they send that back to us again, we'll be up against the line at that point in time and realize that they're just not willing to work with us.
Congressman Garrett, does the leadership of the House, Speaker Boehner, Leader Cantor, Majority Whip McCarthy, do they understand that they would be leading the minority in the House were it not for people like you and other Tea Party-supported Republicans who were sent to Washington to stop borrowing and to cut spending rather than giving the president a good chunk of what he wants?
Right, exactly. If the leadership, and I don't see this happening, we're all of a sudden to agree with the Senate President or the administration, then yes, they would be leading the minority and not the majority anymore. And leadership, initially with the CR, where were they? They came out with the proposal that Congressman Ryan came up with, saying we only want to cut $58 billion. But thank goodness we had the freshman class come in, as I call it, the cavalry coming in, the reinforcements, if you will, to our small group of conservatives here in the House that existed before, and said, no, that needs to be more. And leadership was willing to listen to that. And I think, and I hope that they'll be willing to listen to us again if any comes back from the Senate.
Congressman Scott Garrett from Bergen County and Sussex County, New Jersey. It's a pleasure. Thanks for being here.
I appreciate the opportunity, Judge. Thank you.
Pro-union activists protesting across the nation argue that public sector jobs are so tough and so important, they need government protection. But Cato's Dan Mitchell wonders why, if that were true, so few public sector workers ever quit. That's next.
You can now